Hey guys, so I'm doing a secret TBR. It might be a little bit crazy for a month-old booktuber that doesn't believe in TBRs to be doing a secret TBR, but I'm doing it. The reason I'm doing this is because I got an email from like a publishing newsletter thing, and among the other nonsense was a 5 suggestions of 1920s books to read for the 2020s, and there were two that sounded pretty interesting to me, and I added them to my want to read on Goodreads. And then when I was thinking about that, I was like, well, I might as well see what else there is. And if I can get a good list together, maybe I'll do something. Originally, I was just going to pick 3 books and read them, but what I'm doing instead, so I don't have to buy any books, is I have a list of 12, I think, books that I want to read that are based in the 1920s, and I'm going to see which one of those I can get either on the Libby app for ebook or audiobook, and then I also might check and see what the library here at the school has that I could borrow, or even like the local library, which isn't the same as the Libby app. But the goal is don't buy any books, see what we get. So the first one on here is Mrs. Houdini by Victoria Kelly, and it's a story about after Houdini's wife died, him trying to reconnect with her. I'm going to keep these brief so this video doesn't get too long, especially because I'm not reading all of them. Next one is The Girls at the Kingfisher Club. This is apparently a 12 Dancing Princesses, Sisters, 12 Dancing Princesses retelling, which is a fairy tale I actually haven't read, even though I really love a lot of fairy tales. And it's set during the 20s, and it's about these sisters going out and hanging out at speakeasies. A lot of these are going to be about either prohibition or speakeasies or post-World War I stuff because it's the 1920s. The next is The Haunting of Maddie Clare by Simone St. James. This author actually has apparently a ton of like 1920s thrillers, and this is a 1920s thriller. It's about a woman who's has to confront the ghost of a scorned woman or something. We'll see. Then we have Lost Among the Living, also by Simone St. James. This is a woman whose husband was killed in World War I. Yeah, another kind of thriller type one from the same author. Circling the Sun by Paula McLean. Another one. It's about a girl that was raised in Kenya that gets married at a young age. We got The Painted Veil by W. Somerset Maugham. And this is about a woman, her husband finds out about her affair and pushes her into cholera. Then we have The Cocoa Beach by Beatrice Williams. This is a woman that goes from New York City to France, and then after she comes back from France, she gets married while she's there, and when she comes back, she and her husband are separated. I think that's this one. And she gets involved with bootleggers and all sorts of crazy stuff. The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. I actually have no idea what this is about, but it was on the list, and I was like, you know what, I should give that a chance. It's always a good idea to read classics that you didn't have to read in high school. The Snow Child by Eowyn Ivy. These are a couple that live in Alaska, and the wife had lost a child, and then years later, this small girl shows up at their house mysteriously. Then we have The Map of Lost Memories by Kim Fay. This is a woman that's interested in treasure hunting. And she's, not, usually supported in this endeavor because she's a woman. And so it's her going to Saigon to do treasure stuff. The Whiskey Sea by Anne Howard Creel is about a woman that ending up running rum, helping run rum during Prohibition to make money to feed her child. And then The Paris Wife is about Ernest Hemingway's wife. And this is historical fiction, but and about her and Hemingway and Fitzgerald and all sorts of stuff hanging out in Paris, and there's some deep secret that comes to light. So those are the 12 books I have. I'm going to look on Libby for now and see which ones I can find. I'm going to start reading them. Plan is to do this in February. I'll see how many I actually read and see what we get. So The Paris Wife, trying to find a good synopsis of it, is about this woman that gets married to Hemingway. So the description online was all about, like, they spend time in Paris and it's about this exciting, luxurious life they have, but also, like, it's very free and people cheat and stuff. I don't know. It hasn't been any of that yet. It started with her, it's all from the wife's point of view, and it started with her just meeting Hemingway. So they aren't even, like, together yet. And we've gotten some of her backstory. It's a little tragic. She's a little, like, hesitant to love. He has backstory that makes him a little hesitant to love. So, if you didn't see, I'm 18% in already. I gotta be honest, I don't think I'm gonna like it. It's just not the kind of story I'm prone to like. But we'll see. I probably won't do videos for all of this, but I will have audio clips whenever I want to vlog, because just my current setup, it takes too long to get going to do the whole thing. So I'll probably have audio clips, but at least every book when I introduce it, I'll have video to go with it. So I will update you when I get a little further into this. I haven't really updated you on The Paris Wife since I started it. It's kind of because I don't really have anything to say. It's just not that interesting. It's not bad. Like, putting it on while I do work isn't bothering me. It's just there in the background. It's not making me stop and go, like, gross or anything like that. But it's just boring. It's, human type struggles. It's dealing with, like, relationship issues and balancing friends and family and struggles of work and things like that. And I just not interested in it. This is like exactly why I don't tend to read, like, contemporaries. So it's just a basic historical fiction. Not really my thing. We'll see though. I'm probably gonna finish it. I am how far in? I don't know. Chapter 26 right now. So I'm quite a ways in. Just gonna keep trucking through it. See how it turns out. We're gonna update you on this whole 1920s reading thing. I finished The Paris Wife by Paula McLean. I finished that yesterday, and let me cut to the chase. I gave it 2 stars, but I don't think it deserves 2 stars. If I were to rate this objectively, I would probably have rated it 4 stars. It's really well written, the conflicts are interesting, it really captures the essence of that, like, time period and the setting very well, but I just didn't care. And it's hard for me to give a good rating to something I just adamantly did not care about. And that's kind of where I was left with The Paris Wife. I thought the characters were pretty bland. So I just had no interest in what happened to them. Like, there was a great conflict happening, and it was really interesting. But I didn't care. I wasn't rooting for the heroes. I didn't care if Hemingway fixed his marriage. I didn't care if his wife, what Hadley, could make it work. I just didn't care. I think what this book tries to rely on, and I found this with a lot of historical fiction that are about real people, not like fake people in a real setting, is that it largely relies on you having an interest in these characters already because they're real people. So I'm sure if you liked Hemingway, if you had an interest in Hemingway, this would mean something to you. But I don't. I never read any of his books, so none of the parts where he's, like, writing his books and she talks about he found inspiration for his book through this thing in their life mattered to me because I just didn't care. I, yeah, I just, there was nothing there. I mean, I didn't even know. Hemingway's been married 4 times. So this was just his first wife going into his second marriage, was like the time period this was about. And I didn't care. I didn't. So that was that one. I finished that and I started The Map of Lost Memories by Kim Fay. This is kind of like if you took the plot of Atlantis, Disney's Atlantis, but instead of it being a random boiler room repairman that gets above himself and is intent on finding a lost city that might or may or may not be just a myth, it's a very, very qualified young woman who has a lot of proof and wants to go find a thing that people actually think exists, just don't know where, and she's not allowed to do it because she's a woman. Um, I've read a couple chapters of it, not very far. I'm doing this one on audiobook too, and I kind of like it. I think I need to get more into the adventure side of it. I haven't gotten to that side yet. It's just kind of been a little bit of the politics of it, of how she's going to make this work. Um, and it was good. Basically, her father used to be a bit of a treasure hunter type guy, but he also works at a museum as like a night watchman or something. And one of his best friends that he used to go on these adventures with is a rich old man that has like a huge collection of stuff that some of which he houses at the museum, some of which he donates lots of money to this museum. And so her dad had helped her get a job in this museum, not really as a curator, but like as an assistant to the curator or whatever. And at the beginning of the book, the curator retires, and she thinks she's going to get his job, and instead they give it to some other guy. And basically, without saying it's because you're a woman, it's because she's a woman. Um, you're not qualified for this position, even though she's been basically doing it for years, kind of thing. So she goes to her dad's friend. Her dad passed away a couple of years ago. She goes to her dad's friend, and her friend, she's like, why didn't you knew about this, why didn't you like threaten them? He's like, well, if you want, I can pull my endowment, I could tell them like, give her this job or I won't give you any more money, or, and he pulls out this notebook her dad had, I could give you this and you could go on and find these things and we can make the biggest collection the world's ever seen about this lost civilization. It's like a known civilization, but like not a lot of information is known about them. And he's like, and you can do that. And she's like, yep, I'm sold. And so she goes off to Asia. She's in Shanghai when the like story actually starts. And she's trying to get somebody to kind of work as a guide to take her to this place. And it takes place, it's kind of an interesting time. I'm not super familiar with post World War I China, but that's, I guess, when the whole communism thing was starting there. So there's a lot of that going on in the background, and it's really interesting. So I think I'm gonna really like this one. I'm hoping I'm really gonna like this one.
Wow. I am just after chapter 5 in The Map of Lost Memories, which is about 20% of the way in, so about a fifth of the way. And I'm really liking it now that I'm reading it. So I got the ebook too from Libby, and Libby doesn't let you both listen and read at the same time, which is a little annoying. But just reading it, I'm liking it. They are still in China. They haven't left. I don't know if I gave a good synopsis of what's going on here. It's lady trying to find this place, and she goes to China before going to where she actually wants to go, which is Angkor Wat, which I'm bad at geography. Anyway, because she wants to recruit somebody to help her. So she's still in China, but she finally has convinced this other lady to help her. And the main reason I'm updating is because I'm really hoping there's a bit of a romance element. I know I'm asking for a lot there because it's probably not going to happen, but a girl can dream for, lesbians, right? But that's where I'm at, and I am really liking it. It's interesting. It's definitely a very, very different kind of book than what I normally read. So I'm going to get back in it.
So, update. I finished The Map of Lost Memories by Kim Fay. I really liked it, actually. It wasn't like a new favorite or anything, but it was much better than I was expecting. When I went into it, I was kind of thinking it was going to be an action-packed, kind of puzzly Indiana Jones thing. And then, I don't know, it ended up a lot deeper than that. And really good, actually. I mean, I didn't love it, everything about it, but I really liked it more than I expected. There's some really interesting and nuanced commentary on, like, colonialism in there that I wasn't expecting. There was a big discussion on, like, what to do with artifacts that people discovered. Like, does it belong to the person that found it? Does it belong to the country it came from? Does it belong to the descendants of the people that used that the artifacts came from? Like, that it was just an interesting thing I wasn't expecting to see in this novel. It's not usually what you get from treasure hunting stories, of course, given that my knowledge of treasure hunting is almost entirely limited to Indiana Jones, I guess, and the librarians, I guess. I probably don't have the best idea of what that actually is, but I'm glad I read this. My two complaints with it, one's kind of more my issue, was just that, like, so the one complaint is just that I personally do not have as much knowledge about the top time period and, like, area as I maybe would have liked to have to understand this fully. It takes place in, like, partially in China, partially in, like, Vietnam, partially in Cambodia during the 1920s. And I wish I knew a little bit more about what was going on in those areas during that time to appreciate some of that more nuanced stuff that was happening. And the other complaint I have is just that there's a weird romance aspect to this book that I kind of thought was dumb and unnecessary. Uh, there's kind of the main character is a young woman. I mean, I don't know how young. She must not be super young considering, like, her background, but um, that goes original first to China and then to Cambodia to try to find this whole thing. And she meets a man along the way that, like, her dad's best friend told her to track down. And I won't dwell on it too much, but they kind of develop a thing. And it just wasn't necessary. And unnecessary romances are a flaw of pretty much every series, every book, every show, every movie. It's just this horrible heteronormative nonsense man and woman main character must fall in love. Um, but in this one, it was actually really distracting. It went a step beyond being just unnecessary to the point where it was just, I don't know, I felt like I was really, really hoping there would be some twist where the love interest in this was going to betray her or something, and it just didn't happen, so he was just kind of there, and it felt like he didn't really serve a purpose besides providing a couple random plot twists. So I think without this, this book would have been, it would have taken it from a 4 to a 5 star for me if that hadn't been there. Um, so then I'm going to move on to the next book, and after going through all the stuff that are available to that I could get, I think I'm gonna go for The Haunting of Maddie Clare by Simone St. James. Is an ebook. I really wanted another audiobook, and there's a couple audiobooks available, but I'm gonna save them for later in the month because I have a big drive home in the middle of this month. And so this one, I don't know what I told you in the intro clip because that was a mess, but I'll read the little description. And it's won, like, awards from both romance and crime genres. So I'm not really sure what I'm getting into there. It doesn't sound cliche. Like, the story actually sounds really interesting and kind of unique, but the tone of the synopsis sounds cliche, so we'll see what it turns out to be. Um, I think that'll be the next one I get to, and I will update with you all about that later.
Alright, just a quick update before I go to bed on Maddie Clare, The Haunting of Maddie Clare. I'm about a third of the way into it, and I'm actually liking it. I was not expecting that, I really wasn't. But I am enjoying it, which is good. Like, it's always good to like the books you're reading. What I'm finding interesting about this one is how drastically different the heroine of this book is from the other two I read. So, like, the 1920s, especially in America, but, like, I think largely all of the Western world was really, well, at least America and the UK, was very characterized by this, like, free attitude and this crazy kind of let loose, vibe that Great Gatsby 1920s vibe. And the heroines of the last two books I read really embodied that. There's like a scene, in The Paris Wife where the main girl is like partying with her friends all night and then crashes at a random friend's house and they just all like sleep on the floor, men, women, whatever. Um, or in The Map of Lost Memories, like the main character in that was very like forward with men and comfortable with that. As opposed to Sarah, the main character of Haunting of Maddie Clare, there's a scene where she's alone with a man and she's like viscerally uncomfortable and she's very aware of the proper decorum she's supposed to present. So that's really interesting to contrast. Um, Going forward with the rest of this, I want to give a slight content warning, trigger warning for discussions of rape and suicide. I don't know how much of a role that's going to play in the rest of my reviews, but I'm going to talk about it at least briefly for this one. So as it comes up, I'll put like a little content warning and a time to skip to anytime it comes up in these discussions, but it will, and you should protect yourselves and do what you need to do. So, yeah. So, this story, the idea is this woman gets hired by a man that looks into ghosts, and there's a specific ghost that he needs a woman because this ghost hates men. And I think even that synopsis gives some, I mean, the implications are not difficult to assume, and it's somewhat close to what you would think. So it turns out when they find out about the woman that eventually became the ghost, was that she showed up at this house when she was 12 years old and had very clearly been raped, which is terrible. She was covered in bruises and the formation of it. She hated being touched, whatever. And she just had a visceral reaction to any men that came to the house. She eventually got a little more comfortable with, like, the man of the house, but any other men, really uncomfortable with. She lived with them for 7 years and then she hanged herself. And she left a note that said, "I will kill them all." And I, I just, I don't know. It's so interesting, and the scenes with the ghost are actually, I find myself getting scared, and I wasn't expecting that because I've never been scared reading a book really before. So it's definitely interesting. I'm tentatively fascinated to see where this goes because I worry about where it could go, and it might not be handled delicately. But if this goes well, I actually might be interested to read the other Simone St. Clair that I have on my list here. And that's really it. I probably won't update you again until I finish this one because I'm speeding through it faster than I expected. So.
Okay, so quick update. I'm going to try to keep it relatively short. I finished The Haunting of Maddie Clare by Simone St. James. I really kind of liked it. Like, I rated it. First, let me reiterate my trigger warning for suicide and rape. I'm going to add in to this domestic abuse and PTSD. Just skip to the timestamp if you are uncomfortable hearing any discussion about these topics. I actually thought the books handled it really well. I was nervous when reading the synopsis that these kind of things, especially the rape and the suicide, were just going to be used kind of as plot points. But I felt like it was handled really carefully, but I'm also just willingly going to admit that I'm not necessarily the best judge of that. I also thought the PTSD was done really well. I mean, this is a post-World War One story, so I think and the two of the three main characters are World War One vets, so I think that was kind of taken for granted that that was going to be an aspect, so I'm glad that it was. The domestic abuse was kind of a background thing. It was more implied than actually stated, but all in all, I think that went really well. Alright, so welcome back to everyone. I finished The Haunting of Maddie Claire. I rated it 5 stars. I'm gonna take a couple days and I might go back and change it to 4 stars later because I'm kind of worried that the 5 stars was more of a reaction to how surprised I was at how much I liked it rather than necessarily an honest rating of how much I liked it. Because I did really like it and I wasn't expecting to like it at all, so the rating might have been overly high. But the scary elements, the haunting elements, I was genuinely scared. The like first scene where Maddie enters the barn, I was like at the edge of my seat. And I wasn't expecting that. I've never felt that in a book before. I've been worried, I've felt fear about the characters, but I've never actually been scared myself. This was the first time I felt that while reading a book. I thought the romance was well done. It's exactly the kind of vaguely slow burn, agonizing romance that I enjoy, where the characters like each other and don't want to admit they like each other, and then there's a moment and then they back off. It was exactly what I like. I think some of my love for the characterization of Alistair and Michael, I can't remember the main guy's name. Whatever. I think some of my love for them may have honestly been colored by the fact that I just went and saw 1917 this weekend. So my like feelings about World War One are pretty like raw right now. So maybe that's having an impact on me and how I felt about these characters, but I thought it was great. I do agree with some complaints I've seen that like Maddie, not Maddie herself, oh my god, the main chick, Sarah, is a little bland, she's a little stale, but I think that fits the time period. I think the time period that like this is set in, she's a typical conservative 1920s British woman from what I know of the time period. I didn't live then, so who knows. Um, so I actually really liked her. I thought it was a good book. I wasn't expecting to like it. So the next book I'm gonna read is I have Cocoa Beach on loan from the library for ebook by Beatrice Williams. And it's been so long since I picked all these books, I don't even remember what it's about. Let's see. Summary, woman goes to France during World War One, meets a man, they fall in love, they get married, she almost immediately leaves him. 5 years later, she's told he died and she doesn't believe it. And then she gets wrapped up with bootleggers, maybe? I don't know. It's very much feels like it's going to be pulling from that 1920s era, post World War One and Prohibition crossing in the U.S. in Florida. So I'm excited to get into that one. That one's like a bestseller, so hopefully it's good. After that, I have the audiobook for the other Simone St. James one book that was on my list on hold, and I'm hoping it'll be here this weekend when I drive home. Ignore my phone. hoping that'll be in and that'll be the next one I read. I won't necessarily update between the two of those just because I might be not in a place to update. And that will be it for now.
Cocoa Beach is a little rough for me. I've been reading for like, what was it, 2-3 days, and I'm like not even a quarter of the way through. I'm not loving it. Part of it is definitely the app I'm using for it. It's not from the regular library that I normally get books from. It's not the Libby app. It's a different app, and the formatting's really bad, so that's making it harder to read. But I'm also just finding it so incredibly boring. But like I know it's like highly recommended and it's like a bestseller or something, so I'm hoping it turns around, but so far not going great. Okay, awesome. The sound quality might be a little messier for this one because I'm in the car, but I started Lost Among the Living by Simone St. James, and I just wanted to let you know before I got too far into it. I'm still reading Cocoa Beach, but really nothing to update on that because, quite frankly, I'm still not quite sure what I think of it. But yeah, Lost Among the Living. It's about a young woman named Jo. She comes from a rather poor family. She never knew her father. Her mother went mad. My assumption would be dementia, but who knows. And then she got married to a young man named Alex. However, he has gone missing in the war, in World War I. He went missing. He's presumed dead. They haven't found a body or anything. He wasn't among the POWs or anything in that. So he's just kind of missing. But she counts herself a widow. It just kind of puts her in an awkward place. She doesn't really have a spot in society. So she ends up falling in with her aunt, her husband's mother's sister. And her mother-in-law was kind of the black sheep of their family because she married an unwealthy man, and then, her husband went and married an unwealthy young woman. So she doesn't quite fit in with the family, but this is kind of so far her moving into her aunt's house and kind of, her aunt, Dottie, hires her on as like a companion, and Dottie is abrasive. She's rather shrewd, and the family is just kind of all a little out of it. Her uncle, Dottie's husband, is a lecher, like unapologetic. He also like clearly hates his wife, hates the house, everything. On top of it, there's quote-unquote queer cousin Fanny, who was apparently quite mad and died just a couple years before that. She had committed suicide. She jumped off of like the roof, and the night she died, a man was torn to shreds, and there's all sorts of rumors in town about what happened that night, and most of the town believes that Dottie is still haunting the manor grounds, like the woods around the town. Nobody will go in, so there's that going on. And then in the meantime, the son of the family has been in the hospital since the war, apparently suffered some horrible PTSD, but his mother is determined to see him married. So that's kind of what's going on. I'm not really entirely sure what the plot's going to be, what the story itself is, but there's just kind of a lot going on as far as family dynamics go. So I'm going to get back to listening to that while I drive home, and I will update you soon.
Okay, I just got back to Maine. I look kind of like crap because of, 8-hour long drive. I've been driving all day. And I hope you'll ignore this boring white background. I found my mail to open that I missed, which isn't a lot, and I know what it is, but I figure opening packages in front of a camera is just something YouTubers do, and then if I finish those while I'm talking, I'm gonna wrap presents and drink some wine because I need it today. It was a rough drive home. But, guess I should tell you why I'm here. Update on 1920's stuff. I don't know if I'm going to include the clip where I start reading Lost Among the Living by Simone St. James because I recorded it while I was driving because I was in the car doing the audiobook, and I don't know how good that sound is, so I will. The book it's another Simone St. James. I really like the other Simone St. James book, The Haunting of Maddie Clare, that I read for this, so I figured I'd give another one a shot. This one I didn't like as much. It's about a woman. Her husband went missing during the war, presumed, MIA, missing in action. Presumed dead, but not officially dead, so, like, she's not actually considered a widow, she can't remarry, things like that. And it's been 3 years since he went missing, and she's now working as a companion for his aunt, Aunt Dottie, and they've just finished a tour of Europe and are coming back to settle in England at her house, the aunt's house, and there's some strange stuff going on there, including the fact that a few years prior, her cousin had died, supposedly committing suicide, and so there's kind of this mystery element of, is her husband really dead, and did the girl commit suicide, and on top of it, the young girl is now haunting the house. Let me show you the books I got here. I'm really excited to finish. This is book 4 for Necroseem Chronicles, and then this is the prequel. So I'm actually going to wrap up the prequel as a standalone novel, but the 4th book I'm going to start in right away, or very soon. Anyway, I think part of my problem with this is I read it at the same time I was still reading Cocoa Beach. And there's some weird parallel elements. Not that the stories are very similar, but there's the whole supposedly dead husband, and the whole mystery there, and there's, like, the aid of a male relative in Cocoa Beach, it's the brother, and this, it's the cousin, and it's just kind of, there were similar enough elements, and I'm hating Cocoa Beach. I really don't like it. I'll finish it eventually, before this month is out. But that kind of soured it a little bit for me in the beginning. I'm gonna need the knife for this one. I started reading Lost Among the Living on Wednesday when I was driving back from my boyfriend's to my parents'. Hair in my mouth? And didn't finish it till Friday, or till today, Sunday, when I was driving back from my parents' house to Maine. And I started the audiobook again, and I honestly could not remember what it was about. Now, once it started, I remembered where everybody was and what all was going on. But in the meantime, it didn't leave an impression on me. Now, the second half was really good. And I think once I realized how similar it was to Cocoa Beach, it actually made it better because it was better than Cocoa Beach. I think my main praise for it, insofar as those similarities go, is that the heroine of Cocoa Beach is so passive and it's driving me up a wall. But anyway, this isn't my Cocoa Beach review. I haven't reviewed this on Goodreads yet. I just finished it, 5 hours ago, but I was in the car. And I just don't know what I think about it yet while I'm here. This is my, I guess she did put a keychain on it. One of my D&D groups. We all have been kind of making each other gifts, and got a little dice cage. Doesn't look like much right now. That one of the players made, and I'm going to try to figure out how to put my D20 in this gorgeous metal D20 that my DM got us. So I liked it overall. It was a positive experience. I'm thinking probably 4 stars. It's not nearly as good as The Haunting of Maddie Clare was, in my opinion. But other than that, I really liked it. The romantic element of it, such as that wasn't very present, which is fine. Like, that's fine. It doesn't have to be super romantic. But And the mystery element kind of was a little slow getting going. Like, it was interesting, but, like, slow, which is fine. So it took a little bit to get into it, but once I got into it, I really liked it. It just took half the book. That's really all I have to say about it. I promise I will finish Cocoa Beach soon. I promise I will finish it soon and get that review out, and that'll be the last one I read, and then we'll be done with this. So, I'll see you guys. Alright, I'm here for the last little bit of my 1920s reading challenge, reading vlog. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet. Anyway, but I'm at the end of it. I finally finished Cocoa Beach. It took me like 2 weeks, which was way longer than any other book on this list. Which tells you I didn't love it. I actually finished it Monday night, but it was like late at night right before I went to bed, and then Tuesdays are crazy for me, so it's 2 days later after I finished it, and even like retroactively, I can't think of anything that really excited me about this book. I gave it 2 stars. I was kind of torn between a 2 or a 3 because while I didn't like it objectively, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad book. So I was kind of hesitant to give it a 2 because I didn't think it was a bad book. I just didn't think it was me. But I couldn't. My main complaint, like the biggest complaint I have of this, is that Virginia, the protagonist, is just so incredibly passive, and it drove me up a wall. She flip-flopped her opinion based on just like whoever had talked to her first, which I've known people like that, and it's a mess. And she just never did anything for herself. She just kind of did what everybody told her to. There was no moment of like resistance. She just kind of went along passively with everything, and it drove me up a wall. I didn't care for any of the other characters either. I kind of saw the twist coming, which isn't always necessarily bad. And there were moments that surprised me, but it wasn't like an oh kind of moment. It was like a oh okay kind of moment, which is dumb, and I don't like, if I'm surprised by something, I want to be surprised and shocked. Not always, cheap shock value, but it should feel significant. It shouldn't just be like an oh okay. I think really the whole story would have been better if it had just been from Simon's point of view. I think he was the more interesting character, and the fact that he's barely in the books is kind of lame. So that's Cocoa Beach. Let's then go recap through everything. I managed to get through 5 books this week. That included 2 audiobooks, 2 ebooks, and then one that I alternated back and forth with. I started with the audiobook, but I think I mostly read the ebook on that one. Started off with pretty weak with The Paris Wife by Paula McLean. This was a 2-star read. It's about Hemingway's first wife, how they met, fell in love, and then the trials of their marriage until eventually they split up. Spoilers for Hemingway's life, I don't know. It's all pretty much in the synopsis of the book. It wasn't really bad. I think I would have liked it more if I cared about Hemingway or already knew about Hemingway or had any sort of interest in the time period and that atmosphere. But I don't really care overly much about the 1920s as a time period. And so, like, without that interest and without the actual interest in Hemingway specifically, it just kind of was just, for me, a bland, boring marital drama. Then things got a little bit better, significantly better, because I went on to The Map of Lost Memories by Kim Fay. I gave this one 4 stars. It was kind of this Indiana Jones, Disney's Atlantis mashup book about a woman trying to prove herself to, like, the men in her life that have kept her down by finding these scrolls in a lost temple that she has some hints about from, like, her parents and stuff. And it could have been a 5-star. I just wanted it to be gayer, if I'm being entirely honest, which is a bit shallow, I suppose. But it just kind of, I don't know, at least less pointlessly heteronormative, I would have liked it more. It just was really good. It was like right about there. It had these really interesting points about colonialism and like the flaws of treasure hunting, but then it just had pointless, dumb romance thrown in that was just not good. It was just there. But it got even better with The Haunting of Maddie Clare by Simone St. James. This was a 5-star book. It's about a woman hired by an author who writes about like ghosts and paranormal activity, And he hires this woman to help him because there's a ghost he wants to look into, that reacts poorly around men. There's also some steamy romance that gets thrown in addition to that mystery element. And I love the book. I wasn't expecting it. I really didn't have opinions on what I was going to think going in. The protagonist, Sarah, was like a really determined woman that had her own drive, had her own things. Like, there was a history she had there. There was a reason she got involved in this and a reason she stayed involved with this that was really believable and interesting. Her love interest was the perfect kind of like rough and tumble, passionate, but also caring man. And then the mystery was just filled just enough with twists to keep me guessing, but it didn't feel like anything came out of nowhere or was cheap. It felt really purposeful. But then I read Cocoa Beach, which took me forever. Um, yeah, so this one's about a woman. She was an ambulance driver during World War One. And while there, she meets a man, gets married. Years later, they're separated, but they're not officially divorced. And she gets a letter that says that her husband is dead. She goes to Florida to settle his estates, but also because she doesn't think he's actually dead and wants to investigate this. I don't really have much to add. I just talked about this. It's just Virginia was horribly passive, and I hated it. Um, the mystery element bored me. I didn't care about the characters. There was some really interesting concepts in there in regards to the like influence of rum running in the area, and like some really cool stuff that could have been cool and just kind of fell flat for me. So almost there. And finally, wrapped it all up with Lost Among the Living by Simone St. James. So I really was excited for this because I finished The Haunting of Maddie Clare and absolutely loved it. And then I kind of got disappointed with it. It was really, gave it a 3 stars. It might be a 3.5. So this one's about a young woman named Jo. Her husband disappeared during World War One, is presumed dead. She works as a companion for her husband's aunt Dottie, and eventually moves into Dottie's house. There she starts seeing the ghost of her husband's cousin, crazy cousin Francis, who had died shortly before her husband's disappearance. And Jo is just not completely convinced her husband is dead. She's not buying everything she's heard about Francis's death. And so she just kind of starts looking into it. For why I didn't like it, it just didn't sit right. I think partly it suffered because I was reading at the same time I read Cocoa Beach, and there were a lot of weird similarities there. So it wasn't nearly as bad, but it just didn't want to deal with those elements of the story. But Jo was a proactive protagonist, so that's good. The romantic element in this was a little disappointingly compared to Maddie Clare. But the mystery element was also pretty good. Still not as good as the Maddie Clare one, in my opinion. It didn't have that horror, creepy element, but the mystery itself was still there. It took a while for this to catch my interest, and when it did, add a twist about halfway through, I got into it more. So, a little above average. Not a great book. Kind of a sad note to end on. So, what are the takeaways from this? I gotta say, I don't love the 1920s as a period to read about. So, a book set in the 1920s isn't going to interest me just for being set in the 1920s. There has to be something else going on. Given how much I disliked The Paris Wife and Cocoa Beach, I probably won't be reading any more from those authors. I actually had another Paula McLean on my list and immediately removed it after I finished The Paris Wife. I just wasn't interested. Beatrice Williams, I think is the name of the Cocoa Beach author. Yeah. I'm more willing to give another shot, but not optimistic. Simone St. James, I definitely have on my list. I don't know if Maddie Clare was a fluke or if Lost Among the Living was just a bad book, but I really want to give her another chance and see if this is something I would like. And then, I don't know, with Map of Lost Memories, does this mean I like treasure hunting books? I doubt that because I really doubt most treasure hunting books are as nuanced. But I do have Lady Rogue on my want to read list, and I think that's a treasure hunting book. If I remember right, I don't know, that sounded interesting. But I might give Kim Fay more of a chance. I have to look and see what she has for books and see if maybe one of those stands out as something to try. There's a couple books that didn't get on this list that I'll keep my eyes out for. Mrs. Houdini and Girls at the Kingfisher Club were the ones that kind of started this idea, and I still really want to read those. The Whiskey Sea and Snow Child are maybes. Snow Child seems a little more interesting to me. Whiskey Sea sounded really good, but it's got a lot of similarities to Cocoa Beach, so I'm not sure on that. So anyway, that's really it. What about you? Have you been reading any of the Roaring Twenties books now that we're back into the 2020s? What about these books? Have you read them? What do you think? Have you read some of the other ones that were on my possible list and think maybe I should go back and give them a chance? Um, yeah, honestly, I love some suggestions because apparently treasure hunting and haunting paranormal ghost stories might be my thing. So if you have suggestions for those things specifically, please leave a comment, let me know.